Okay, so you should all be seeing my presentation right now. Please let me know if you don't. Throughout, you can ask questions, of course, preferably through the chat. I will try to get to it because we have quite a lot to cover in this hour. Otherwise, I will respond to everyone if it's relevant for everyone later on, or hopefully we will have a couple of minutes at the end for questions. So Rosetta 6.2, which has been released beginning of this year, includes it's not officially a major version, but it does include a lot of end-to-end in significant features. A lot of the focus was around infrastructure, as you can see here in this slide, and integration. So a lot of it is around expanding the API capabilities, integration capabilities with other systems, and but of course we continued the user experience. We basically completed the user preferences on almost all pages in Rosetta, and another nice feature which would make life easier for you, which you'll see. We added the preservation, a fast-track preservation planning in parallel to the existing preservation planning, which is an exciting feature which I'll demo. And around data management, a lot of features around managing the IE or updating the API, the AIP, and other useful features like delete representation and others. And delivery, we'll see a feature around streaming service for video audio formats, a very nice migration, out-of-the-box migration, which will provide you an enhanced video rendering experience. So we'll start with the infrastructure. As you probably saw already in the release notes, we now 6.2 supports Oracle 19 in addition to Oracle 12.1. So all the previous Oracles 11.x they're no longer supported, and customers who we did reach out to all customers who have an earlier version, and in order to reach out to us so we can work with them on upgrading to a later Oracle, to Oracle 19 or 12.1. This did also have implications on those institutions running on Solaris, who we have also been in touch with in order to plan a migration over to a new environment. So one of the major features around in the infrastructure was around the SIP processing. This was a combined feature coming from the working groups and requesting to have a more efficient algorithm around the SIP processing in order to prevent starvation but improve the parallelization of the various SIPs. And here on this slide, you can see where the configuration is done on the SIP processing workers. You can configure this to run in parallel. The default is unchecked, of course, because we're not changing the current behavior. We are going to be working with some institutions for really running initial the initial checks on this flow. And what you can see here, which is we also updated in the base camp, there's no need to go into too many technical details, but really the main addition here is the file processing queue, which now, up to now, files were managed synchronously, and the SIPs were managed asynchronously and were managed on the parallel threads. And from now on, the files themselves are managed asynchronously, and we take into consideration in our algorithm the two factors which have the most impact on the processing time of a file, and one is the size of the file, and one is the number of files in a SIP. And according to that, we prioritize the SIP. And on our tests, we have seen a significant improvement in performance of bulk SIP processing. We also prevent starvation. So if there is a single SIP which has many very large files, we of course distribute those in the different threads so that the SIPs with the smaller files aren't starved. So any institution who is interested in testing this and going ahead, please feel free to reach out. Of course, you can try it on your own on a test set, for example, and then go on to your production. Otherwise, you can reach out to us and we will assist you in the process. So storage integrity job, this is a continuation for the effort we've been doing in mainly around 6.1. We have done a major improvement in the system robustness. We have done a lot of root cause analyses around issues coming from the customers, and we are hoping that you will see the impact of this work. But the customers have also raised the need to have more reflection of the storage integrity, mainly around the database versus the file system. So we've added a job. It's a job which works in certain limitations, but this job knows to identify missing files. In other words, dead references in the database, misplaced files. So the job knows how to find files which are in the file system, but just not in the right location according to the database, and orphaned storage files, which are files which aren't referenced at all in the database. So the job can run on a typical NFS storage. It does not run on other types of storage for performance reasons and other reasons which we did attempt to run the job and variations on it on different types of storage. So the scope currently is on NFS storage. And the main motivation for this story, well, there's two. One is if there is a small set of files of discrepancies which you want to handle yourselves. That is in case there is, for example, up to 10 files which are misplaced, and you can then handle it. And alternatively, if there is, God forbid, a end-to-end system error which is causing over 10,000 failed files, then at that point anyway, the report will be important just for awareness. It won't be useful from the manual point of view. So the job halts after 10,000 failed files just to not catch the CPU for too long, and at that point you would anyway need to, of course, turn to us and we'll help you out in resolving the issue. So we'll just see what the output looks like from this job. The job runs, you can see it in the scheduled jobs management, and this is an example of the job output, the log. Again, if you can't see my screen, then please feel free to unmute yourself and let me know that you can't see the browser. But we are seeing now the log. As you can see in the log, it has various sections. One is identifying missing files. So these are dead references in the database. You can see over here, the highlighted an example. Perhaps I'll make this slightly larger. You can see an example for a file which is a dead reference, but the job did find the file in another location, and the job informs of that other location. And finally, orphan files, which were found in the file system, but not in the database. So we ran also our periodical upgrades of some of the more outdated third parties, which we continuously attempt to keep them up to date. In this case, it was ImageMagick, which we upgraded to one of the later versions, and Flowpaper. Specifically, ImageMagick also improved the compression, and there were quite a lot of defects which were raised by customers, and this resolves many of them. And now we'll move on to data management. In data management, we started by delete representation, which is a feature which came from several use cases from customers. We had a discussion back at the annual working group meeting, mainly due to the sensitivity of anything to do with deletion in the system, and specifically around deletion of representation. So we added all the capabilities for deleting a representation other than the preservation master. So Rosetta does enforce an IE to have a preservation master, and therefore you cannot erase a preservation master. The assumption is that if you want to erase a preservation master, it basically makes the IE redundant or unusable. So therefore you can delete the entire IE. So this is really mainly for erroneously created modified masters and other preservation types which you have added to the system. Derivative copies could have been removed up to now. So that the feature here is around representations which are stored on the permanent repository other than the preservation master. So we've added an API, we've added the service and a task chain. And again, due to sensitivity, we have added a maintenance advanced task chain group. And this allows you to assign the task chain of delete representation or delete file or delete IEs. You can assign that to the maintenance advanced, and then you can, of course, control or restrict the staff which can manage those, can run those processes to a very specific set of roles and privileges, and which also frees up the rest of the processes. So you can take all the other lighter weight processes which have less of an effect. You can leave those in a regular maintenance task chain group. And it is less restricted now also from the roles and privileges which are required for running a regular standard task chain, and then have the more heavyweight task chains assigned to the maintenance advanced. So we'll just take a brief look at what that will look like. So here we'll take an IE with a modified master, lock the object. From here we can delete the representation, which is of course also it adds an event, a provenance event to the IE. And then important to note, this feature does not erase it. The motivation here is not saving storage, since we always want to allow customers to restore previous versions. We do not erase it from the storage. So if you do want to clear up space in your storage, you will have to do it explicitly on your own risk, of course. And so here we of course want to keep the IE as an entity which can be restored. So we commit the changes here. We can of course then restore the deleted. We can then restore going back to the previous version. So unlike a derivative copy, which cannot be restored since it is not stored in the permanent repository and not in part of the METS file. And there you can see now the previous rep is now restored. So the next feature, managing version increments for IE updates, basically granting the institutions with more control over the increments of the versions of the METS. This started from ideas exchanged and developed throughout the working groups. And the request was, since up to now, if you would run separate updates on the IEs on a single IE with several updates, each update will generate an additional version of the IE, which is of course not very efficient from the storage point of view. Many times, you just want to run, your application wants to run a batch of APIs, of updates, but you would want just a singular update increment to the version. So we have added to all the update APIs a commit parameter, where you can define whether you want this action, where you want the IE to be unlocked following this action or to leave it locked, which would be commit equals false. So in addition to that, we have also, so you can either define whether it's locked or unlocked according to the additional parameter, or you can always leave it as commit is false, never commit through the APIs. And then we've added a manage IE. Manage IE, which is a general API for running, for retrieving information on the IE, on the status of the IE. You can commit all the uncommitted changes or roll back all the uncommitted changes. So this is going to give you much more flexibility. We'll just see an example for this, what this would look like. If we'll take an example of an IE, (103), we can see the metadata here. We have creator 7, title 7, description 8. So if we run an API, I know it's not very clear what you can see here, but I will change the creator over to test 10. You can see over here the commit. If I set the commit to false, it means that the IE will remain locked. So as you can see, this is now locked. And what's important to note here is also that I am logged into the system, into the UI with the same session, the same user as the user which is running on the SOAP API. That is why I can see the working copy. If another user will be logging into the system, that user will see the permanent copy and will not see the changes to that I've done permanently. And now if I run 10 and set the commit to 1, this will then lock the IE, as you can see over here. Go back to the metadata, you'll see that the changes have been applied. It's now test 10 and test 10, and most importantly, the version is now incremented to 6. As you can see, no changes have been done. Only one change has been done in the since the morning session. So that is a feature which should, of course, allow you to save a lot of storage on your side. It will require, if you have existing, if you do have existing external applications running on the APIs, this will require to have certain adjustments, adding that parameter to the APIs. Of course, you can continue using it as it is today. The default is going to continue being what it is today, that the commit is true. So, of course, it won't break any of your existing applications. And another feature which came through Israel Archives and several other institutions, where they would like to, while adding a new representation, they would like the capability of adding the file metadata using the same API, and not up to now that wasn't possible. You couldn't add file level metadata while adding a new representation, and of course, if you have a bundle which does include file level metadata, something which is desirable. And that is now possible. So you can add the different levels of metadata, which you can see here, both for representation and for file level metadata, using the add representation or update representation APIs. So this is a feature which I'm sure will make many of you happy. It is the ability to update any editable DNX property for IE, representation, or file level. So staff members will be provided with a drop-down list and a text box supporting autocomplete, including all the available options per entity type. And we did restrict it to 5 properties per task, just to keep control over the job, since we don't usually want to run so many updates in a single job. We'll just see what that looks like. So going into the administration, going to the task chains. When you add a chain, you will have an update. When you add a task, you'll have an update task for each one of the different entity types. So we look for update here. As you can see, we have an update file DNX, update IE DNX, and rep DNX. So if we take update file DNX, for example, when we come to set the parameters, here you can see the various properties. And by autocomplete, if we want to, for example, update and batch the entity type for the file entity type, this is now automatically, the value is now automatically populated with all the possible fields for the file entity type. Okay, so moving on to the final data management feature. I'll start slide here. So this feature is providing the ability to release the work from a specific staff user mainly unlocking all the IEs locked by this user and assigning all SIPs from the TA workbench and the AAA that are assigned to this user. So this feature is designed to facilitate the process of relieving users of their assigned work in a single action, mainly around a use case where a staff member has gone on extended leave and is probably going to be returning at some point, since for a user which has left the institution, we have already delete user which already does all that job. So now this is really allowing you to leave that to have the user stay intact, but release all the work which is assigned to that user in a single action. And another feature coming from the customers request is the RIP, the RIPID Cleanup, which is now added to the is added to the general cleanup job, and there is now parameters you can see here for the clean finished RIPs, which is set by default older than 90 days, but of course can be configured. Integrations. So those of you who integrate with Aleph, Voyager, we have enhanced the capabilities of the bidirectional updates between the CMS and Rosetta. We have added 2 new APIs, assigned CMS and unassigned CMS, and the update CMS metadata can now be fed with a list of CMS record IDs. And the job then, as done up to today, it was possible to only feed it one by one. And the job then reaches out to the external system and updates the CMS. And so you can see more details of that in the developers network. Another feature around integration is the ability to include suppressed IEs in the SRU response, a request coming from customers. So we have created a parameter or the ability to control whether the editor view can view the suppressed IEs, adding a specific parameter, which I'll show you in the UI. Editor typical and full will always allow viewing the suppressed IEs. Just an example of what that would look like. So here you can see, I'll just add the header, the authorization. So here, this user specifically does not have the right privilege or the right parameter on the user to see the suppressed IE, which is, as you can see here, is IE 64778. If I go into the system, to the users management, user management, here you can see the release work, which I mentioned earlier on. But if I then go to the editor view in the demo institution, sorry, we are in the consortium. I'll go back to the management. This is possible from the management. So going into the user management, manage users. Bear with me one more second. Here, update. Editor view in the demo institution. If we update here, you can see the parameter show suppressed IEs. Once I save that, I should be able to see the suppressed IE running from the SRU request. Refresh this. There you go. Now we can see the suppressed IE. turn off the header. Okay, and in delivery, we have a very nice feature around the digital asset management side of things. The access of video files, really making it much more accessible, mainly for large video files, where we enhance the derivative copy task to migrate using FFmpeg to migrate from MP4 over to HLS streaming, which for large videos makes a huge difference, and basically allows you to stream the content instantly using the migration tool plugin. So on the one hand, it is the derivative copy task, which can be run as an enrichment task on deposit or at any later stage. We have added a new streaming viewer based on the video.js with a preprocessor, which extracts all the HLS subfiles, hidden files, and feeds them to the viewer. And we have added a new file delivery rule, streaming HLS, which can be associated with a specific file entity type for streaming HLS. And we'll see what that looks like. So we have an example here of an IE with an MP4. This is an MP4 over here. It's also FFmpeg. It runs pretty quickly, even on a relatively large file. Here we can see it in the services, but of course it can be run as a task on any level and as an API. And here we'll create the derivative copy representation. Set this to none. We want the MP4 files, of course, and transformation profile, we will choose the video to HLS streaming, which is now available. And the file entity, you now have the option of populating the file entity type. You can set this to streaming HLS, which would allow you then to associate the specific streaming viewer, which I've already pre-configured in the system. So then submitted. As you'll see, this is going to be pretty quick. So this, of course, creates an additional derivative copy. Even if you have existing derivative copies, this will create another one, and does not catch up any space on your permanent repository, as it's a derivative copy. Usually quicker than this. I might let it run for a bit. Okay, I'll let this run. For the meantime, we'll go on to the next feature. So we managed to get in as many features as possible, and then we'll get back to this one if we have time. So user experience, as you remember, we've added in the previous releases, we've added personalization or user preferences for many of the screens in the system. We have now added many more screens, and now we've also added a quick search, which again reduces the number of clicks which are required to get to specific pages. You can't always remember where for example, the access rights or other areas are. So this allows you to, as you can see over here on the top left, over here you can search, for example, reports, and you can see we have reports from different sections. So we have all of the reports under the different sections. You can also from here add the specific page to the favorites menu, which is then displayed over here on the left. Again, that should really make life a bit easier for the staff accessing the management module. So preservation. As I mentioned earlier, we've added a fast-track preservation planning flow aside the existing advanced planning module, which introduces a simplified wizard for migrating sets of files to a new format. This flow is designated for institutions who know ahead of time which migration flow they would like to run and on which set. and therefore do not require assistance from many of the Rosetta's advanced preservation planning features, which you have already today, such as alternative comparisons and more complex evaluation. So the set which the preservation planning runs on, the migration runs on, does not necessarily need to be based on a format library risk, since again the institution knows exactly what it wants to migrate. It could be simply an image file, an image format which looks better in their applications and doesn't have any recognized risk. And doesn't want to be constrained to specific risks defined by the community. So we'll see what this looks like. I have a predefined set of BMPs in the system, which we will now migrate over to TIFF. Specifically, we adjusted the existing plugin with ImageMagick to migrate the BMPs over to TIFF files, wrapped it in a plugin and installed it on the system, a matter which just took simply a couple of hours, i.e. 64811. As you can see here, we have a set of BMPs of Vermeer. So now we have the managed preservation sets, which up to now was system generated by the risks report. And now we have an option of adding our own set name, migrate 6.2 BMPs. Next, we have a very simple wizard. Here we have a file level set which we need to create, i.e. PID. As you can see, we can use any indexed element, not just the risks, i.e. 64811. Here you can see the list of BMPs which we will want to migrate over to TIFFs. Save. We are back to the set page. And here we have a launch plan column, which for user-generated sets includes the option of a basic plan, which is the new one which we've introduced in 6.2, and any other plan which is risk-based will also have the advanced option of running the existing preservation plan. So when we go into the basic plan, we have 6.2 migration. There is a possibility to upload an administrative document as requested by the customers. And then the target format, in this case, we want to migrate over to TIFF files, which is 353. We will link this format. And here too, we have the option of defining either external or internal, if we want to have it inside or outside of Rosetta. Plugin. We will select the BMP to TIFF migration tool. And here we can define the various, this is optional for defining an evaluation for the file comparison, or examining the target file only. This is optional, we will skip it for now. And we now have our new plan, which is ready for sign-off. And from here, basically, the flow is very similar to the flow which we had up to now, just without any characteristics of related to the risk itself. We can also refine the set if you want to run it on a test set. Otherwise, you can execute it instantly. And once it's ready, for evaluation, you can evaluate the results. And once you evaluate the results, complete the evaluation. And at this point, you can either abort the plan, rollback, or commit. And then you can view here the various stages that the plays go through until they're committed. As you can see here, to the permanent. That was pretty quick. And now we should have an IE with a set of TIFF files, as you can see over here, not the original BMPs. So as you saw, that was very straightforward and can be used when you know ahead of time exactly what you want to do with which files and which format you want to migrate over to. And here you have a nice pretty set of Vermeer paintings. I have also uploaded a video, which you can watch this later on also if you like. The link will be together with the link for this session in a couple of days, but you can already see it in the highlights email which I sent when the release was out, beginning of January. So these are a few announcements which I mentioned earlier on, that Rosetta now supports only Oracle 19 and 12.1, not earlier. And since it supports Java 11 only, it can run only in Linux environments and not on Solaris. We have been in touch with the customers who that is relevant for. So a brief roadmap review. We are now working on 6.3. 6.3, there aren't going to be many features coming from customers, since this is mainly an infrastructure upgrade where we have several heavy task end-to-end infrastructure upgrades which are required. Together with that, we are going to include AIP export, the ability to export all versions of an AIP, which was originally supposed to be in 6.2, it's going to be in 6.3. And we are starting a mission of complying with WCAG for accessibility purposes, for complying with WCAG 2.1, which is the latest accessibility standard. This is going to take, we're doing a large batch of it is going to be done in 6.3. It's going to take another release or two till we complete the entire set, because of course this is an end-to-end test task which affects all the screens. But I think that is something which of course can put many of you at ease with relation to any licensing issues and accessibility to your staff. So after that, that is going to be followed up by the 7, a major release coming on the second half on H2 of 2020. A major release which is going to include, these are the main focus areas which we are going to see additions in. We are having discussions with the customers, with the working groups on having fundamental changes in the system in 7. This should be an exciting year from that point of view. In the user experience, we are going to, this is what we started doing already around the preservation planning and other areas which we've been really simplifying. And in 7, we are going to be applying this to all the material flow setup and generally the system setup, having a more workflow-oriented UX, preventing the need to have a full dependency on support or documentation, have a more talkative UI. We are looking into online help and other various options of really making the usage of the system much more streamlined. We are looking into a new infrastructure for reports, which we are going to start implementing in 7, replacing BEERT eventually and having something which is more adjustable, customizable, so make life much easier for you in creating new reports, and again, less dependency on us and easier from the technical point of view. APIs, we are having discussions. We have a focus working group with the customers around APIs. We have the direction is most probably going to be a replacement of all SOAP APIs eventually with REST APIs. Of course, this is going to be done gradually, and you will not be shoved out of your existing applications. Can continue running. We will of course keep you in and keep you updated on the details of the deployment plan for the APIs, but this is a request that came from customers, and this is also going to improve many areas around the APIs, not just the efficiency, but also the documentation and other issues which have been raised. Data sharing, this is something which we have an ongoing discussion where we are basically talking about a parallel to Beacon that we have on our SaaS solutions. We are talking about exporting of the system usage of the customers, which will allow us to have a much better reflection of how the system is used. This will allow us to provide a much more preemptive support, a much more intelligent roadmap planning, and eventually we want to create a portal which can be used by the customers for sharing best practices and different profiles of data, which can create a new level of communication between the customers. In addition, we're having discussions about email preservation, mainly around the decomposition and the pre-processing stage of extracting the attachment and other metadata like header ID, the folder structure, etc., and preserving and doing a full preservation of all those different elements, and on the other side, delivering it as an email. This is we of course we want to do this running together with the customer to have a fully usable set of features added to the system. Nested IEs, this is an ongoing discussion we're having with customers, and I'm sure they will continue. They will continue, and hopefully we can finalize it perhaps in the next annual working group in Kiel. UX, we've discussed several of these issues. The inline help, which I mentioned, is going to have a more guided tour throughout the UI, and we are also following up on the RIPID community on the version 3, which has been released. A better version has been released, but we are waiting for the official release in order to incorporate it in the system, and this will provide ability to render much wider range of formats, including 3D, PDFs, and so on, and which will allow institutions to focus on the RIPID viewers, primarily the universal viewer. So any of you who are not involved in the Rosetta community, this is a call out to be part of the Rosetta community, which is the best way to have an impact on the roadmap. We have in June, there's the Kiel in Kiel. There is the annual working group meeting organized by the customers, which is a great opportunity to have an impact and to hear mainly from others also about their experiences. We've been involved very much in 2019 in the digital preservation community, in the global community, and we are going to continue doing so. We are going to participate in PASIG in Madrid. It's going to be in IPRES in China, sponsoring OPF and DPC possibly, and really being involved in the different events organized by the OPF. We are always striving to be up to date with the latest research and to be part of the strong part of the community. So that is that. Thank you very much for joining. I'll just see if there are any questions. Let me know if you have any questions now. Otherwise, parallel SIP processing. So a question came through regarding parallel SIP processing. Are multiple Rosetta application servers required to see its effect? So yes, it should affect the multiple Rosetta application servers. Again, you can reach out to us, and we can work with you on configuring the SIP processing on your environment. It is recommended to run it first on a test batch before applying it to the production. You can send through further if you have more technical questions. You can send them through later on, and I'll sit. We can also sit together with the technical team and have a more detailed discussion. In the migration workflow, can you add parameters to the ImageMagick process? So yes, absolutely. You can add parameters. You have a parameter section there in the UI, which you can define for the plugin. Alternatively, if you have a fixed set of parameters which you know you need for a batch of files, you can add those in the script plugin. So you have both options basically. So you can send through more questions later on. Thank you very much for joining, and I will send out a recording in the next few days. Have a great day, evening, night, whatever it is in your time zone. Bye.